Here's one of the biggest questions that not a lot of people have asked themselves. The money in your bank account right now, you traded something to get it, right? You traded hours, you traded attention, you traded a piece of your one finite life that you are not getting back ever. I'm not trying to be poetic, that is literally just what happens. You sold a slice of yourself and you got a number of money units in return. Hey there, I'm Bram Kanstein and this is Bitcoin for Millennials. And in this episode, I'm sharing why I think Bitcoin is the greatest wealth opportunity for millennials that exists today. But this is less a pitch for Bitcoin and more an explanation of the problem you have today, but many are still not aware of. If you're enjoying my content, it would mean a lot to me if you could subscribe to the channel and like my video to support my journey. Thanks a lot. Now let's dive in. So here's the question. Did anybody have to trade a piece of their life energy to create those money units that you are getting in return for selling your time and energy? Just hold that for a second because we're going to come all the way back to it near the end of this video. And when we do, I think it's going to rearrange how you see the entire game you've been playing since your first paycheck. I'm not exaggerating that, and I hope that it clicks for you. So hold the question and let's go somewhere. First, here's the thing I keep on coming back to about money. It's the most honest mirror that we've ever built. And it's the one we look into the least. Because all money really is, underneath every other story we tell about it, is human energy and time packaged up so it can be moved across time and space. You do something hard on a Tuesday and the world hands you a claim. Later you trade that claim for somebody else's hard Tuesday, maybe even 2 years from now. A meal, rent, a flight, a year of somebody's expertise, that's it. Money is energy and time in transit. From the past, when you did the work, to the present when you can and want to spend it. And I want you to really feel how strange it is that we don't really talk about it in this way. We talk about money like it's a thing, and it's not a thing, it is a battery. It is storage for the only two things in your entire life you cannot manufacture more of: your limited time and the limited energy that you can expend in that time. Okay, so now take the question from the top and apply it. When you earned your money, you had to spend something real and finite. The fair expectation, honestly the childlike, obvious expectation, is that whoever gets to make new money should have to do the same. That the money should cost its maker the same kind of thing that it costs you. I call it the symmetry test. It's one question, and you can hold it against any form of money for the rest of your life. Does creating it cost its creator the same real, finite, irreplaceable thing it costs you to earn it? Basically, does this money represent tradable energy in a proper way? And here's what I think you already know somewhere, even if you've never had the words for it. Today's money, fiat money, the political currency that you are forced to use, fails that test. You felt it fail. We're going to get very specific about how, but notice the feeling first, because the feeling got there before the explanation did. The little voice that says working harder isn't fixing it. So let's talk about the money that costs its maker nothing. Here's a number. In 1971, the United States had roughly $0.6 trillion in broad money supply. As of January 2026, that number is about 22.44 trillion. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet went from under $1 trillion before 2008 to a peak of almost 8.9 trillion in 2022. Now, none of that new money was created by anyone trading a piece of their life. Nobody mined it with their own hours. It was typed, someone pressed a button on a keyboard, and it did not pass the symmetry test. And here's where a lot of people tune out, right? Because the next word they expect is inflation. And you've heard about inflation 1,000 times and your brain has built a callus over it. So I'm not going to talk about inflation like that. I want to show you the part that's actually worse and that almost nobody explains properly. When new money gets created, it does not fall evenly on everyone at the same moment. It goes in at very specific doors. Banks, governments, the biggest holders of assets. They touch it first at today's price before anything has gone up. And by the time it works its way down through your wages, the price of the stuff you actually need has already moved. A guy named Richard Cantillon described this about 300 years ago. So understand that this is not a Bitcoin talking point. This is one of the oldest observations of all economics. Whoever is closest to the money spigot captures the value first. Whoever is furthest away, which is you, the person who did a finite amount of actual work, pays for it. And you never get a bill. And that's the thing. It is very abstract and it is very obfuscated. There is no invoice, there's no receipt. It just shows up as your life getting quietly more expensive while your effort stays the same. And think about how a government, like the US government, can create money from nothing to then pay for real energy in the form of oil, for example, in the Middle East, which is a brilliant arrangement. It's a scam. I'm going to rename that because the Cantillon effect sounds like a midterm, and what it actually describes is deeply personal. I call it borrowed energy. Here's what borrowed energy means. When money gets created out of nothing, somebody somewhere gets to spend a claim on real energy and real work without having done any of it. And the energy they're spending is not abstract. It is yours. It is the future buying power of the hours you already sold. Somebody borrowed against your life and they didn't ask. And there's no repayment. There's only dilution. And that is borrowed energy. I'm going to come back to that. But you want to see borrowed energy in one comparison. From the end of 2008 to the end of 2024, the S&P 500 went up roughly 428%. Over a comparable stretch, the inflation-adjusted wage of the typical worker grew at well under 1% a year. Net productivity from 1979 to 2025 grew about 90%. Typical worker pay grew about 33%. So if your pay had just kept pace with what you actually produced, the typical worker would be making something like $16 more an hour right now, today. And that gap didn't disappear. Energy just doesn't disappear. It got moved and it got borrowed. And this right here is why working harder hasn't closed the distance, and why some quiet, rational part of you already suspected that effort wasn't the variable. And clearly, it isn't. Most people stop too early with Bitcoin. They buy it, maybe move it to a wallet and think they are done. But they're not. The real questions are how you're securing it, how private your setup is, and whether you're verifying your own transactions or trusting someone else. And what happens to your Bitcoin when something happens to you. This is the layer that most people ignore, and it's the most important one. That's why I've been working with the Bitcoin Way. They help you set up self-custody properly, including privacy, cybersecurity, inheritance, and even running your own node. And they do it without ever touching your Bitcoin. They're not a custodian. They're your support team. If you're serious about this like I am, go to thebitcoinway.com/Bram, that's BRAM, to book a free call. They'll walk you through your setup, personalize everything to you, and help you get a much stronger position very quickly, whether you're a beginner or more advanced. That's thebitcoinway.com/Bram. You're sprinting on a track and the people near the spigot keep adding length to the track. You are not slow, the track is moving. And everyone feels that, right? You can feel it for years. You're not imagining it and you're not lazy. The math is moving. The math is changing the playing field that you think you are playing on. Now, I'm keeping this part deliberately light and I want to tell you why, because it matters for what we do next. I'm not trying to make anyone angry here. Angry is a low energy state, and honestly, the system does not care if you're angry as long as you stay inside of it. Angry and inside is the most profitable customer they have. So the goal of this episode is not to rage bait you. The goal is for you to see the mechanism so clearly that you stop arguing with the treadmill that you're on and you just step off it. But to do that, you have to be willing to look at where this is going. The thing nobody our age gets told plainly is that the floor you were told to stand on is being pulled away slowly on a published schedule in public where anyone can read it. The Social Security Old Age Trust Fund is projected to run dry in 2023. At that point, it pays roughly 77% of what was promised out of incoming taxes. After legislation signed in mid-2025, that projection moved a year earlier to 2032. And at the same time, more than 4 million Americans are turning 65 every single year between 2024 and 2027. The biggest retirement wave in the history of the United States, hitting the system in the exact decade that it runs short. The ratio of workers paying in versus people drawing out has gone from over 5 to 1 in 1960 to 3 to 1 now, heading below 2.5. Now here's what I want you to hear next. This is a slow problem with a fast personal exit. This is the most important thing to understand in this video. This is not an asteroid. You can't see an asteroid coming and you can't move. This is an iceberg. You can see it from a very long way off and you are not tied to the deck. You have time to turn. And turning does not require you to fix the system. It does not require you to win an argument, an election, or convince a single other person. It requires you to change one thing: how you store the energy you already spent and got rewarded for. That's the entire reason to pay attention now instead of later. Not because the sky is falling, the sky is not falling. It's because the exit is open and it's open today. But the cost of using that exit goes up every single year you keep your life savings parked in something that fails the symmetry test. But before that exit can make any sense to you, you have to see something about the room you're standing in right now. Because most people cannot see the exit. Not because it's hidden, but because they can't see the room that they're in. What 99% of people don't realize about the financial life they're living is that they didn't choose it. They inherited it. The way you inherit a phone's factory settings. And then they mistook the factory setting for the nature of reality itself. You were handed a set of what I'm going to call default settings. Here are the default settings. You work for money that quietly loses value, so saving feels kind of pointless and you don't really do it. You spend because holding cash is a slow bleed and everyone around you is spending it anyway. You borrow because debt is normal and you'll repay it in money that's worth less by then anyway. You treat the next 12 months as the only unit of time you can afford to plan in emotionally, and you outsource your entire future to a pension system, an asset bubble, and the quiet hope that the whole thing holds together long enough for you specifically. Now, here's the thing. Nobody sat you down and pitched you those settings. There wasn't a meeting, and you just absorbed them from the culture, from your parents, who absorbed them too, from their money. From a money that, by failing the symmetry test, rewards every one of those behaviors and punishes the opposite one. And that, honestly, is the quiet genius of this whole arrangement. A money that loses value over time does not have to order you to live for it right now. It doesn't have to command you to grab now and discount later. It just makes that the rational move, and then it lets you arrive there yourself. So it doesn't feel like programming, it feels like your personality. Safety in a Move's writer of the Bitcoin Standard put the historical version of this really cleanly. Sound money, money you cannot easily create, he argues, lets people think long-term, save, invest for the future, and that long-term saving and investing is literally how civilizations accumulate capital, move forward, and build an abundant future. Easy money does the reverse. It raises a whole society's time preference because it makes saving for the future structurally irrational. The time horizon of an entire generation. Our generation. It's not a moral failing, it's a monetary output. We didn't get more impulsive, we got handed a money that makes patience expensive. And there's a deeper layer that I think about a lot. There's a thinker, Ian McGilchrist, psychiatrist and philosopher, who describes a world that's become more and more mechanical, fragmented, abstract, weirdly overconfident, and at the same time emptier. And he ties it to the one mode of attention running unchecked. The part of us that abstracts and manipulates, operating without the part of us that sees things whole and in context. I'm not going to overclaim the brain science, but as a description of a fiat economy, it is almost too perfect. Because fiat money is the abstraction that forgot it was an abstraction. It's a claim on energy that stopped requiring energy. It's a map that prints more of itself. It's a number that detached from the life it was supposed to represent and then started acting like the life part was optional. I want you to feel the following. The people that run this system, they are not smarter than you. They are not wiser than you. They do not have some special access to the truth that you were not issued. They are running inside their own inherited default settings, defending a configuration they also didn't choose, with incentives that make being honest about it very expensive for them personally. Every Bitcoiner hits this moment. You need cash, maybe for a house deposit, an emergency, or a tax bill, and you're staring at your stack thinking, do I really want to sell this? Here's the thing, you don't have to. You can borrow against your Bitcoin instead, so there's also no taxable event and your stack can keep on stacking. This is where Firefish comes in, a peer-to-peer marketplace for Bitcoin-backed loans. And Firefish is not a lender. They built a protocol that makes this all possible, which is exactly why they never, ever have to touch your Bitcoin. During your loan, your Bitcoin sits in an on-chain multisig secured by open source code. You can find offers for different amounts, durations, and rates at firefish.io. And when you decide to get a loan, you can use code BRAM to get 30% off your first loan's fees. That's firefish.io and code BRAM. The reality that makes you anxious, the one where your effort never quite catches up and the floor keeps sliding away from you, that was not handed down by nature. It was not handed down by anyone who earned the right to define what's real. It was constructed by ordinary people no better than you. That is the single most liberating thing I realized about modern fiat money. Because anything that was constructed by people no better than you is something that you are completely allowed to walk out of. And that's all waking up actually is. It's not a feeling or a vibe. It's the specific moment when the default settings stop looking like the world and start looking like settings. That's the whole awakening for me. The menu was always a menu, you just thought it was the sky. And once you can see it's a menu, there's only one question left worth asking. Is there anything on it that actually passes the symmetry test? So now we go back to the question I asked you to hold at the start of this episode. Did anyone have to trade a piece of their life to create the money that you hold? For fiat money, the answer is clearly no. And now you understand in detail exactly what that no has been costing you across your whole entire working life. For Bitcoin, the answer is yes. And this is the whole point. Bitcoin cannot be created from nothing. It's not a belief or a promise someone can quietly break. The protocol does not allow a single new coin to come into existence without real, physical, irreversible energy being spent to prove the work was actually done. This is literally, mechanically, how the Bitcoin network functions. Every Bitcoin that exists comes with the proof that someone, somewhere, spent real energy at a cost to bring new Bitcoin into being. The same way you spend real energy to earn your paycheck. Now, the price of Bitcoin is not set by the energy that made it. Price is set by demand in the market, and Bitcoin is the only financial asset that is traded globally 24/7, 365. Bitcoin is the only money whose creation is symmetrical with how you get money. You cannot conjure your salary out of a keyboard, and neither can anyone conjure Bitcoin. It is, as well as humans have ever managed to build it, the most honest available abstraction of finite human energy and time. Because it shares the one property your own labor also has, the property fiat true in the bin. It cannot be faked into existence. It cannot be printed to dilute people who actually did the work. And that's the symmetry. Bitcoin mirrors your own life back to you accurately, probably for the first time ever. Your energy is finite, it was really spent, and your time was finite, which was also really spent. Bitcoin is the only money that is honest about requiring the exact same thing. Everything else has been asking you to trade something finite, your life, for something its makers can summon infinitely, and then quietly making you feel like the irrational one for even noticing. Next to that, this is probably also the dumbest trade that we could ever do in our lives. And yes, of course, the Bitcoin price moves a lot. It goes up and down, especially over months, but understand over any time horizon that actually matters for storing a life's worth of energy, and I mean 4 years and up, the question was never the volatility. It was the integrity of Bitcoin's supply. And the supply is the most predictable monetary schedule ever created by humans. Around 95% of all the Bitcoin that will ever exist already exists. New issuance is now under 1% a year. That's already lower than gold, which makes it a harder money than gold. And it keeps falling on a predetermined schedule that anyone, including you, can verify. And yes, it uses energy. But here's the part that most headlines skip when they talk bad about Bitcoin's energy use, which you now know is an essential part of its function as money. As of early 2025, Cambridge researchers put the sustainable share of Bitcoin's electricity at about 52%. In December 2022, during Winter Storm Elliott, Texas Bitcoin miners voluntarily switched off around 1,400 megawatts, more than 96% of their capacity, and handed that power back to a freezing grid because the economics told them to do so. Peer-reviewed work in 2024 found a single landfill site capturing methane to mine Bitcoin could neutralize over 2,000 tons of methane, and methane is something like 80 times more warming than CO2 over 20 years. Bitcoin, as strange as it sounds out loud, is the only buyer who shows up to pay for energy that is already created but nobody else wants, in places nobody else will go. Energy is the input. For a money that passes the symmetry test, that is the feature. That is not a bug. And of course, there's the fear of people who saying, they will just ban it. But that one quietly flipped while everyone was looking the other way. In March 2025, the United States shared its plans to set up a strategic Bitcoin reserve by executive order. A sovereign wealth fund in Abu Dhabi disclosed a Bitcoin position more than $600 million worth in a regulatory filing dated in February 2026. The question stopped being whether governments will allow it, and the question is how long they keep pretending they're not. Now, the reason to do this is not to get rich. The reason to do this is what it does to the person who does it. When you store the energy you've already spent in something that cannot be silently diluted, something shifts in how you relate to your own future. And it is not subtle once it happens. That background hum of financial anxiety, the one you have normalized so completely that you genuinely think it's just what being an adult feels like, it has a specific source. It is the felt experience of saving into a leaky bucket. Your work, you store it, it drains, you work harder to refill it, and it keeps on draining. And some part of you quietly concludes correctly, given the bucket, that the future is not safe to plan for. And that conclusion, that exact conclusion, is the high time preference setting. It was never your character, it's just what a leaking bucket does to anybody who's honest about what they're seeing. So patch the bucket and watch what comes back online in you. You can think in years again. You can take the kind of risk that actually builds something. You can start the thing. You can learn a hard skill that takes 3 years. You can take the unpaid months to make the better work instead of the fast work. You can have the family. You can say no to the job that was only ever about defending yourself against decay in the first place. Because now the downside is bounded by an honest store of value instead of a melting one. There's a psychologist who described what he called the autotelic personality, someone who needs relatively little in the way of possessions, entertainment, comfort, and status because the doing itself is the reward. That is not a personality you're just born with or without. It is way more than we admit, downstream of whether your time horizon is even allowed to stretch past survival. You do not self-actualize on a foundation that's being eroded under your feet. You defend. That's all you can do on a crumbling foundation, is to defend. Sound money is not a luxury hobby for people who already feel safe. It's a precondition for becoming the kind of person who builds anything at all. Which brings me to the one sentence in this entire episode I actually want you to walk away with. The fiat system needs you to be a consumer. Its entire function depends on it. It depends on you spending claims before they melt, on you defining your worth by what you can buy, and on you staying anxious enough about your future beyond the next 12 months. A consumer is just what you are when your energy leaks out faster than you can store it. And that's the whole definition. And a builder is what you become when it doesn't. So you opt out of a predatory system, not as a protest, not to win, but you opt out because the act of opting out is the thing that converts you from the one into the other. You stop trading your one finite life for a claim that other people know better than you can dilute whenever they want. And you start trading it for the most honest abstraction of human energy that's ever been built. And you hold the keys to owning it yourself. You did the work, you spent the hours, they're not coming back. You were never supposed to come back. That was never the deal. The only question that's actually still open, the only one, and it's one you can genuinely answer this week, is whether the energy you've got left gets stored in something that respects what it cost you or something that doesn't. You aren't a consumer. You never were. That was a default setting. You're a builder. You always were. Made in image of God. Study Bitcoin and get back into alignment. Peace.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, if you want to help me shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, please like this video and subscribe to stay connected. I hope to see you for our next episode. Bye.